Our first keynote speaker is a person, a familiar face here at the CeBIT Global Conferences. He is a familiar face too, if you watch the news, anything that has to do with cybersecurity, he is the man that we journalists like to turn to. He's the Chief Research Officer at F-Secure, and he even says himself he hunts hackers. Today he's going to be talking about the next arms race. What does that mean? We're about to find out. So if you could, give a nice, warm morning round of applause to Mr. Mikko Hyppönen. Mikko. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Indeed, my name is Mikko. And we often hear things about how cybersecurity problems run companies into bankruptcy, and how cybersecurity problems are so expensive for companies to handle. I think my drive is ready now. But when we actually look at real facts, there are surprisingly few cases of companies which actually would have folded and would have gone bankrupt because of getting hacked. It has happened. We have cases of that happening. But it actually is not the norm. What does happen when companies get hacked and when there are massive data breaches is that the stock value plummets, although typically it does recover, and the management gets fired. We've seen CEOs and CISOs and CSOs and CFOs getting fired after company getting hacked or after a major data breach. But how expensive exactly is it for a company to get hacked? Well, we actually have a good recent data point on that, and that is the Yahoo data breach from last year. Because Yahoo was in the middle of negotiations for a merger with Verizon, and they had to drop their price tag by $350 million US, only because of getting hacked. So that's how much it costs. $350 million. Now, who caused that damage to Yahoo? Who was behind the loss of $350 million in the price tag in the merger? Well, this guy was. This is Karim Baratov from Canada, or Toronto in Canada. Or actually, he's originally from Russia. Together with his friend Alexei, they were behind the Yahoo data breach. And one thing I've learned over the 26 years over my career in computer security and hunting hackers is that some hackers really like to brag, which means they go online and tell their friends about their success in hacking and post pictures to Instagram about the things they buy with the money they make. And especially expensive cars seem to be one of the things Russian hackers like to buy. So this is Karim's Mercedes and his Aston Martin. Here's a nice picture from his Instagram. Here's another nice picture from his Instagram. That, my friends, is a Rolls Royce. And that reminded me of another hacker and another company which got breached. I'm not going to do a hands up here, but if I would do a hands up on how many of you are using LinkedIn, I'm guessing most of you would be using LinkedIn. And if I would ask how many of you were using LinkedIn 5 years ago, I'm guessing most of you were using it already 5 years ago, like I was. I was using LinkedIn 5 years ago, which means all of us were victims of the LinkedIn data breach of 2012, in which 130 million accounts were stolen from LinkedIn. 130 million accounts, email addresses, and LinkedIn passwords were stolen by this guy. This is Yevgeny Nikulin from Moscow. And when we go and look at Yevgeny's Instagram, it's actually very similar to Karim's Instagram. Because here is Yevgeny's Mercedes, here's his Aston Martin, here's his Porsche, and his Rolex, and yes, here is his Rolls Royce. Which creates the next question, which is, how do you actually do this? Like, how do you convert stolen data into Rolls Royces? Well, with Yevgeny, we know this fairly well, because Yevgeny, like Karim, has been arrested. Karim was arrested last week. Yevgeny was arrested in January because he was stupid enough to leave Russia to go on holiday to Czech Republic, and he was arrested while he was having dinner in a Michelin-starred restaurant in Prague, and he's now waiting extradition to United States, where he will be spending most likely decades in a jail. So during our investigation, we concluded that he made most of his money, maybe all of his money, by simply reselling the stolen database to other hackers. As far as we know, he wasn't misusing it himself. So why were other hackers buying this database of 130 million email addresses and passwords? What were they doing with it which made it so valuable? Well, one thing we know they were doing with it was that they were searching that list of 130 million email addresses for specific type of emails. In fact, they were looking for email addresses which go to Gmail or to other similar webmail services, because Gmail has become the single sign-on system for the whole internet. Let me explain to you what that means. When hackers gained access to 130 million addresses and they searched for Gmail accounts, I'm guessing maybe 10% of those email addresses were Gmail addresses. So they got 13 million Gmail addresses. Then they try logging in to those Gmail accounts using the same password as the user had on LinkedIn. And of course, as we all know, people recycle passwords. So a modest guess is that 10% of those users would have the same password on LinkedIn and Gmail. This would give the attackers access to 1.3 million Gmail accounts. Then they start searching for old emails, because Gmail never deletes old emails. So if you have an old email from years ago, it can still be found. And they were searching for a specific type of emails. They were searching for those emails that you get when you sign up to an online store. We all know this. When we sign up to a store, we get a welcome email. Thank you for registering in our store. So if you've ever registered to any online store, there's this welcome email, which is still somewhere in your Gmail archives, and they can find it. So they know that there's an account in this online store with this email address. And now they can go and try logging in to that store with that email address. They can try the same LinkedIn password. But even if you have a different password in online stores, it doesn't matter. They can still get in. Even if you have a different password, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter because every single login page has a magic button. There's a magic button on every single login page. And that magic button is, I have forgotten my password. Because when you click this button, then the service will send you a new password to where? To your email. And they already have your email. This is what I mean by Gmail becoming the single sign-on system for the whole internet. Once they gain access there, they can gain access to pretty much everywhere else. And now they are in every online store account you have, and now they can start ordering stuff. Like, iPads and PlayStations and laptops. Stuff that they can sell. This is one of the mechanisms on how they make money with stolen credentials. Another way criminals make money is by sending emails to your organization's human resources department. Why? Because the people who work at HR are all day long opening up emails like this. Email attachments, resumes, and CVs like Cameron R. Chandler, who wants to start working at your company, and he sends a resume, which is a very nice resume. It even has active content. Please click Enable Content. And when you click Enable Content, then you get his work history and his education history. And you also get infected. And once the attackers get into one PC in your organization, then they can use lateral movement to move around and gain access anywhere else. So that button, that Enable Content button, is one of the most common tricks that attackers use to gain access to systems in your organization. And I have friends who work at Microsoft, and I've told them that they really should rename the enable content button. It should be renamed from enable content to infect my system. If it would be called infect my system, maybe then people wouldn't be so eager to click on that button. So, in this case, if you click on that button, what happens? Well, you get infected by DMA Locker, which is a ransom Trojan. And ransom Trojans have been one of the biggest headaches we've had for the last 5 years. We all know the story. One employee in your organization gets infected by opening an attachment or getting infected at an airport lounge. Then they walk into your organization with their infected laptop and plug it into your corporate network, and then overnight the Trojan will go through your network and encrypt every single file share that the infected user can access. And now we can all take a moment and think about how many file shares and how many network folders we can access in our organizations. Now, the biggest innovation I've seen in ransom Trojans over the last year was with a ransom Trojan called Popcorn. We found Popcorn in January. It's a pretty normal ransom Trojan. Infect your system, ask for a ransom, 1 Bitcoin, which is around 1,200 euros right now. But the trick is that if you don't have the money, if you don't have 1,200 euros to pay for the ransom, it will give you your files back for free. You will get your files back for free if you infect 2 of your friends. And this is brilliant. I mean, this is really, really clever. This is really thinking out of the box. Very, very creative. It's hard to be angry at these guys when they are so creative. Because what they're doing here is that they are combining a pyramid scam with a ransom Trojan. So you end up with the first victim who doesn't have the money to pay, so he will infect 2 of his friends. And they will infect 2 of their friends. And they will infect 2 of their friends. It ends up with exponential growth. And at any stage when 2 of these victims pay the ransom, then the original person gets his files decrypted for free. This actually works. It's fascinating. Another big thing which is happening around us right now is the next big revolution, which is the IoT revolution. We are all very lucky that we have been alive during these defining years during which the mankind has gone online. During our lifetime, internet appeared and became the norm. So far, it's only been computers and smartphones which communicate with each other over the internet. But now, it's going to be everything else. Not just the computers, not just the phones, but everything will start communicating over the internet. If it uses electricity, it will be using the internet. And the IoT revolution will happen. It will happen whether we like it or not. A typical reaction that people say when they hear about potential IoT revolution coming up is that they are not going to be part of it. Like they don't like the idea of washing machines or anything going online. And they tell me that, you know, I'm never going to buy IoT machines. Well, that will not be possible. You will not be able to avoid the IoT revolution. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. Because 2 things are happening. First, Moore's law. These things are becoming cheaper and cheaper. Connectivity is becoming free. Eventually, the single chip that you can embed into any appliance which gets that appliance online will be so cheap that it doesn't even matter. It's going to be 10 cents, 5 cents, nothing. And the other thing which is happening is connectivity. Right now, most IoT appliances in our homes go online with your Wi-Fi. So you have to let them access your Wi-Fi. That's going to change very soon. We will have new technologies like LoRa or LTE-M or 5G, which means these devices will not need your Wi-Fi to get online. They will be online on their own. And that means that very quickly every device will be an IoT device, and you will not even know that they are IoT devices. You go and buy any appliance. It doesn't look like an IoT appliance, but it's going to be an IoT appliance. And there are no features for you. There are no features for you, the consumer. There's no display. There's no app. No nothing. You know, you go and buy a toaster, and it looks like a normal toaster. There's no features. I mean, why would you even need any extra features in a toaster? It's a goddamn toaster. But in 10 years, it's still going to be online. And it's going to be online not to benefit you, the consumer. It's going to be online to benefit the manufacturer. Because the manufacturers know that data is the new oil. And the manufacturers want to collect data. They want to collect analytics. And the way they get analytics about their appliances and how they're being used is by putting them online. And they will put them online if it only costs 10 cents to do it. So this is going to happen. So your toaster, which looks like a normal toaster, will be calling back to the manufacturer. And they will collect data like, you know, how often are our products used? How often do our customers toast bread? At what time of day do they use them? How often do we have failures? Where are our customers? In Hanover, are our customers on the east side of the city or on the west side of the city? And if we have less customers on the east side of the city, we should advertise more on the east side of the city. This is valuable data, and this is what they will be collecting. And there's nothing you can do to avoid this. And the problems we're seeing right now from the IoT revolution are real. But I think, I hope, I wish this is only a transient period. And I wish what happened with the internet itself is going to happen with the Internet of Things. Because when internet came around, obviously it exposed us to new kinds of risks. But clearly the upsides are much bigger than the downsides. And I wish the same thing will happen with the Internet of Things. Right now we're seeing a lot of risks. But I hope when we will be here, let's say in CeBIT 2027, then we can look back at the first decade of the Internet of Things, and then we can see that, oh yes, it exposed us to new kinds of risks, but the upsides were much bigger than the downsides. We don't know if this is going to happen. We hope it's going to happen. We wish it's going to happen. And the risks we see right now basically come from two different problems. Problem number one, accidental exposure of the admin interfaces. And that means that, you know, people put things online and then anybody can control them and anybody can configure them because they did not change the password, they did not restrict access to the interface, they did not put it to a separate network. That's one problem. And the other problem is that there are vulnerabilities in the systems themselves, making these IoT devices the weakest link in the network where they are. So your company gets hacked, not because they got in through your firewall, but because they got in through your coffee machine. These become the weakest link at our offices. So the way we can look at it right now, unfortunately, is that the Internet of Things itself is a danger to the Internet itself. And we saw an example of this last October with the Mirai botnet. And being here on the CeBIT Sakura stage is very fitting because Mirai is Japanese and it means the future. And this might very well be the future of IoT botnets. And the Mirai botnet caused and was used to launch the single largest attack against internet infrastructure in history. It made up a network of 120,000 attack devices, none of which were computers. They were all IoT devices like security cameras and heat pumps and DVR recorders. And this problem reminds me of another problem. It reminds me of this. We all remember VHS players. We all used to have a VHS tape player in our living rooms, right? In the 1980s, 1990s, when you would go to any of your friend's house, in the living room there would be a big TV, and under that TV there would be a VHS player. And at every house you would go, that VHS player was always displaying the same thing on the screen. At all of your friends' houses, the player was always blinking 12 o'clock. Am I right? I'm right. They always were blinking 12 o'clock. Why? Because when you turn it on, it doesn't know what time it is. And for you to set the time, you have to get out the manual and read through the manual to learn how to configure and set the time. And we never did that. So at every friend's house you would go, you would see this. And this is the same problem we have today with our IoT devices. You can imagine yourself going and buying a new IoT security camera. A new security camera that you bring to your home. You unpack it. You take out the camera. You screw it on the wall. You turn it on. You take out your phone. You install the app. You pair your phone with the camera. You run the app. And it works. It works. You get the display feed. You get the video. Excellent. It works. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't change anything. It works. This is what we do, which is exactly the same problem as we saw in the 1980s, which means we never read through the manual. We never read to page 80, which would tell us how to change the admin password. We never read to page 90, which would tell us how to set up user accounts and how to restrict access to the admin interface. We never read to page 120, which would tell you how to segment your network and how to keep the device out of the public internet so it will not get hacked. And this is a problem. And the IoT vendors, the appliance manufacturers, are unlikely to fix these IoT problems by themselves. Because the most important selling point for home appliances is price. When you go buying a coffee machine or a washing machine, you're looking at price. You are not asking questions about the cybersecurity features of the washing machine or the coffee machine, right? When you go and buy a washing machine, you're looking at the price, you're looking at the color, you're looking at how many kilos of clothes can it wash. You are not asking questions about firewalls and intrusion prevention technologies. And this means that the manufacturers cannot invest money into making these more secure because that would increase the price. And price is the most important selling point. So how do we fix this? Well, one way to fix it is regulation. And I don't really like regulation in general, but we already regulate a lot of things about our appliances. We regulate a lot of things about the safety of our appliances. Maybe we should regulate something about the security of our appliances as well. Because today, when you buy a washing machine, you can be quite certain that it's not going to give you an electric shock. You can be quite certain that it will not have a short circuit and catch fire. But it will leak your Wi-Fi password. So maybe we do need regulation, or maybe we need certification. It could be self-certification, but we do need something. This problem is unlikely to fix itself. And the reason why everything is going online is to collect analytics, because, I told you this already, data is the new oil. And this is absolutely true. You go and check the revenues of the largest oil companies on the planet, and you compare it to the revenues of the largest data company on the planet, and you'll see that they are roughly the same. One of the largest oil companies in Europe, the Norwegian state company, Statoil, their revenues last year was $82 billion. Google's revenues last year were $85 billion. Data is absolutely the new oil. And just like oil has brought us a lot of prosperity and a lot of problems, data will bring us a lot of prosperity and a lot of problems. The kind of problems oil has brought us include global warming and polluting the nature. So if you're working with oil, you have to worry about oil leaks. If you're working with data, you have to worry about data leaks. Data is not just a source of prosperity, it is also a liability. And this is something that today affects every company, because all companies today are software companies. regardless of what your company does, your company is a software company. Every company is a software company because of digitalization. And the way we differentiate the best companies in their field is how good they are in digitalization. You're working in food processing. Well, you are a software company because everything is being run by PLCs. Everything is being controlled by software. You work in automobile industry. Well, you are working in a software company because what are cars today? Cars are data centers on 4 wheels. And this also means that every company can be targeted with attacks against their data. We spoke about ransom Trojans. Those are very democratic problems. They target everybody. But we also see much more targeted attacks where a company is hacked on purpose, targeted only this one company, and then they get a ransom demand to recover from the hack. Either the data has been stolen and they are threatened with a data breach and leak, or data has been deleted and you have to get, if you want to get it back, you have to pay money. For example, the MongoDB attacks we saw late last year were all examples of these. And right now, the attackers have a problem because they don't really know what is the going price for a hack like this. Like when they hack into a company, they don't really know how much ransom can they ask. But next year they will. Because next year we will get a price point for targeted ransom attacks. Because next year we will see the General Data Protection Regulation from EU. Next May we will have GDPR. And GDPR regulation across Europe mandates that if your company suffers a data breach involving customer information and you weren't taking good enough care of that information, EU can fine you with a fine which is up to 4% of your company's global revenue. 4% of your global revenue. Here we have a price point. I'm forecasting that next year we will start seeing ransom attacks where companies get hit. Their data is stolen. And then the hackers contact them and say, hi, we stole your data. We can leak it. It seems to be personal information about your customers. And if we leak it, you have to pay EU 4% of your global revenue. And we will give it back to you for 2% of your global revenue. This could happen. Because right now, these guys don't know how much money this is worth. Next year they will. And then we have the problems with the various governments. Now, are we in a cyber war? Well, maybe we are, but most of the attacks we see, most of the attacks that make the headlines are really about espionage and spying, not really about waging war. But we are in an arms race. And in the previous arms race, we knew very well the capabilities of different players. When you look at traditional militaries, we know exactly, for example, which countries have nuclear weapons and which countries do not have nuclear weapons. Or, you know, how many tanks does Russia have? You can actually Google it up and they will give you an exact figure. How many aircraft carriers does the United States have? You can find it from Google. This is public information. So the power of traditional military power, the strength of traditional military power was in deterrence. Like having all these capabilities and making sure your enemy knew what you had. Because then you didn't have to fight. But in cyber arms race, we have what I call a fog of cyber war, which means that we don't know the capabilities of other countries. What is the offensive online capability of Germany? I have no idea. What is the offensive online capability of Vietnam? I have no idea. What is the offensive online capability of South Korea? Beats me. We don't know. Of course, we know the big boys. We know USA is very good. We know Israel is very good. But it gets very, very foggy very, very quickly, which means cyber arms have no deterrence power. The only power they have is actually using them. And that's why we do see cyber arms used in conflicts. And that's why we see real examples of cyber war. So what would be a real example of real cyber war? Well, last November, there were several cases in Ukraine where Ukrainian soldiers' personal smartphones were infected with Russian malware, which then pinpointed their location using geo-IP localization and GPS, after which Russian artillery were shooting in those locations. So when soldiers are getting killed because their smartphone is infected, that is cyber war. That's what we call cyber war. And that is the arms race where we are in right now. We are in the next arms race. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do you want to do Q&A?
Sure.
We've got 3 minutes or so.
3 minutes, fine.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Anybody who wants to talk about Armageddon? No? I mean, I know that some people in the audience were saying during your speech that every year you're here and they always look forward to what you're going to say, but it's always almost a dark picture, Mikko, that you paint. Are we headed for a dark future?
I am an optimist, which might be surprising considering the field where I work in.
Yeah.
And even though my message more often than not is pretty gloomy, we really shouldn't forget about all the good things that the internet has brought us. Clearly, the upsides are much, much bigger than the downsides. But what I do worry about is what kind of an internet will we be leaving to our children? Mm-hmm. Because we were given a public and free and open internet. And every day it's becoming more restricted, mm-hmm. more closed and more dangerous. And I'm worried that we will not be leaving a free and open internet to our children.
Well, you know, some people would say that that is the inevitable consequence to any type of world, any type of new world that you enter. I mean, you compare this to the oil industry, for example. And in the early days of the oil industry, it was very similar to the early days of the internet, right? There was no regulation. Sure. You could go and drill anywhere you wanted. There was no fracking, for example. Sure. So isn't it inevitable that the internet become almost like more than just a commodity? I mean, it's going to be regulated. It's not going to be free anymore.
Yeah, of course it changes. And that's why we should be very careful about how do we change it. Mm-hmm. And we must not let just the powers that be ignorantly legislate things which will make no sense. For example, we are right now seeing a lot of push from many different countries about regulating strong encryption. Why? Because bad people use strong encryption. Let's make it illegal to use strong encryption, which basically means let's make it illegal to use security, which obviously is a bad idea. What's even worse is that if we make it illegal to use strong encryption, then you won't be using strong encryption, and I won't be using strong encryption because we follow the laws. But you know who doesn't follow the laws? The bad people don't follow the laws.
That's right.
So it's not going to work. I mean, the cat is out of the bag. Things like strong encryption have been invented, and we cannot uninvent them.
Yesterday, Edward Snowden said several times he can't fix things, but the global community should fix things. Well, you know, you're saying something in a similar vein, and I'll ask you the same thing I asked him. So who is the global community? Who's going to fix things, or who's going to ensure that the internet remains open and free? That's not, I mean, that's a hard question to answer, isn't it?
I mean, obviously, there's the easy answer, which is you and I and all of us. But that's not really going to work.
Right.
And there's a deeper problem here, which I mentioned in passing when I was speaking about how IoT will change. In fact, I think in many ways, internet will disappear in the sense that in 20, 30 years, nobody will be speaking about the internet anymore. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be so built into everything that nobody will even think about it. I mean, you go somewhere, you're not going to be asking, like, do you have internet connection? It's going to be as stupid as, like, do you have air to breathe?
Well, it's going to be like electricity.
Or even more obvious. I mean, there will be a global network of connectivity, and every device will always be online, and we don't even think about it. So it's going to become invisible.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much, Mikko. As always,
Good luck.
It's great to have you here.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Give him a round of applause, everybody.